Welcome to the daily digest of news around Ukraine. A lot of interesting things have happened lately, so watch this video until the end to keep abreast of all the latest developments. Traditionally, we will start from the hottest spots and all our attention is riveted to the Soledar, around which the most fierce battles continue. The Russian army had success in this direction. After the Ukrainians pulled back to the railway embankment and assumed their new defensive positions that are detached from the city, the Russians could no longer maintain the same level of intensity of their attacks. Today, the Russians launched a series of assaults in the direction of salt mines and Missle station, but they got caught in the crossfire from multiple Ukrainian positions and eventually were destroyed. Tragic was the video in which Ukrainian doctors heroically rescue their fighters in the hottest spot under shelling. Pictured in the footage are the ruins of the small Donbas salt mining town of Soledar, and a fleeting scene from a battle where life, death, and injury has been measured in the past week in such near and not-so-near misses. On Friday, as Russia's defense ministry said its forces had taken full control of the salt mining town, Western analysts suggested that, if true, it would be at best a Pyrrhic victory, gained at high cost to fighters from the Wagner mercenary group of Yevgeny Prigozhin, who claimed the town had fallen on Wednesday. Ukrainian officials denied the Russian claim, suggesting they were still holding on and counterattacking, with the Ukrainian military spokesperson Serhiy Cherevedy reporting ongoing battles. While the situation on the battlefield remained difficult to verify on Friday, by the week's end, geolocation of reports by Russian war correspondents from Soledar suggested Russian forces were in control of large parts of the town. Ukrainian forces, however, appeared to remain within Soledar's municipal boundaries, still fighting in the northwest, around the town's salt mine and railway junction. Crucially, Ukraine still appears to control the road beyond the town, connecting neighboring Bakhmut and Soledar with Sloviansk and Konstantinivka, whose capture would further threaten Ukrainian defenders in Bakhmut. What is clear is that the battle for Soledar and Bakhmut has become emblematic of the current state of the war on Ukraine's eastern front, and more widely symbolic of the state of Moscow's offensive. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky promised on Thursday night to provide everything necessary for battles for Soledar and Bakhmut promptly and without interruption, as it appeared that even if most of Soledar has indeed fallen, Russian forces will need to actively defend it. Accounts from both sides have depicted what has been a hellish battle, amid claims by some Ukrainian combatants that they have heard Wagner fighters, many of them convicts recruited in exchange for pardons, being told by commanders they will be shot if they retreat. Oleksandr Porbisky, a Ukrainian soldier from the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, recently evacuated from Soledar with hypothermia, described the fighting in an interview this week with Ukrainian Pravda. Porbisky described coming across dead Russian fighters who had been killed in their vehicle on an ammunition resupply run. It was just suicide. When we approached them, the dead, we saw that the driver and other soldiers were without body armor, without helmets, with one magazine in the machine gun. In the very close infantry battles, we heard their commanders shouting, "Not a step back. We will shoot." We heard and saw it with our own eyes. Drawing conclusions, we can say that the situation remains difficult but controllable. One of the most important news today was a massive missile attack on Ukraine. The sound of 4 explosions were heard in central Kyiv on Saturday morning. For the first time since Russia began regular missile and drone attacks on the capital this autumn, the air raid sirens sounded after the attack. Until now, the air raid sirens have sounded from 10 to 90 minutes before an attack, giving residents some time to seek shelter. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed that something had landed, writing on Telegram that explosions had occurred in Kyiv's Dniprovsky district, on the eastern bank of the river. Klitschko said emergency services were on their way to the scene. Minutes after the explosions rang out, head of Ukraine's presidential administration, Kyrylo Tymoshenko, wrote in Telegram that a rocket attack was occurring on critical infrastructure in the capital and advised residents to seek shelter. Earlier on Saturday morning, 2 S-300 missiles targeted energy infrastructure in the Industrialny district of Kharkiv city, according to its mayor Ihor Terekov and head of Kharkiv region Ola Sanhubov. The authorities said the damage was being assessed. Sanhubov announced that there could be emergency power outages in the city as a result of the attack. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko said rocket fragments had fallen in Kyiv's Holosisky district, on the western bank of the river. He said the fragments had fallen in non-residential area, and there were no casualties. Kyrylo Tymoshenko said a house was hit in Kopyla village, Pev region. No casualties have been reported so far. Air raid alerts have also sounded for Cherkasy, Poltava, Sumy, and Chernihiv region. Important news was the aggravation of the situation around Belarus. On Friday, January 13, Belarus alerted the artillery units of one of the brigades. According to the Belarusian Defense Ministry in Telegram, such actions allegedly take place as part of the combat coordination of the regional group of troops together with the Russian Federation. Artillery units 11 and a separate mechanized brigade are brought to readiness to perform tasks as intended, they noted. Other details are not reported. Such actions are taking place against the background of the threat of a new offensive from the territory of Belarus and the possible open participation of Minsk in the war against Ukraine. In a December interview with The Economist, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, said that in February the Russian Federation could launch a new offensive. According to him, the offensive may take place not in the Donbass, but in the direction of Kiev from Belarus. Before that, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also stated that this time the direction of the offensive could be changed to the west of the Belarusian-Ukrainian border in order to cut the main logistical arteries for the supply of weapons and military equipment to Ukraine from partner countries. On January 6, the Speaker of the State Border Service, Andriy Demchenko, said that the situation on the border with Belarus remains under control. Ukrainian border guards do not record the movements of equipment and personnel of the enemy near the border. Lieutenant General Alexander Pavliuk, commander of the grouping of forces and means of defense of Kiev, said that the threat of invasion from Belarus remains unlikely, despite the pulling of military equipment by the Russians into the country and the planned joint exercises. Russia is preparing for a long-term war and putting the economy on a war mode, military intelligence of Ukraine emphasizes. They are aimed at strengthening the potential of the Russian armed forces and creating conditions for conducting operations that were planned at the very beginning of the war, but were unsuccessfully implemented by the Russian occupying forces. The occupier would track all military resources for the continuation of the war in Ukraine, and the recent appointment of the Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Gerasimov, as the new commander of the occupying forces testified not only to the military failures of Russia, but also to the preparation of the Russian Federation for the continuation of a large-scale long-term war. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and be the first to know about events in Ukraine.